Hey everybody, this is Mark Paulson from the Landcat recording for Morningstar in what I think is the third of a very occasional video series on consumer duty. These are just short videos where we share some of what we're seeing out and about and try to give you an idea of where you should be in your consumer duty preparations and some of the practical things you can do to help you along the way. Now, by the time you watch this, it will be at least early July, okay? And so I reckon the time for all the jokes about consumer duty is over. We're right at the sharp end now, and the plans that we should have had in place from October last year and the work that we should have completed by the end of April is now heading towards a point where it should all be published and ready to use by the end of July. So let's have a little think about where you should be and what you can do if you've still got some work left to do. So first things first, right? You are, as an advisor firm, the manufacturer of your own advice proposition. So you should have done your target market assessments, which many of you would have done from prod already. You should have checked to see whether you feel the services you offer are value for money, perhaps done a little bit of informal benchmarking on those. What is it you deliver? What do you charge for that? And how do you deal with any situations where you think your charges may be inappropriate, either low or high, of course, and what mitigations have you put in place for those? So that should all be worked through by now. You should also have done some work on vulnerability. How do you scan clients to see if they exhibit signs of vulnerability, and what do you do if you find those signs? If you have gaps in your processes, you should have recorded those and you should have written down your mitigations for how you're going to make those better. So if, for example, you don't have any way of knowing about, I'm going to make an extreme example here. You've got no way of knowing about physical vulnerabilities because you do all your advice work over the telephone and you never see anybody. I know that that wouldn't be a thing, but let's just pretend. Then that's the sort of thing that you might want to say, right, I don't know, so therefore I'm going to ask clients, do you have any of these issues? And if so, then I know I have something to deal with there. So this is all stuff that you should have done by now. Now, you don't necessarily need to publish it in the way that other people do, and we'll come back to that in just a wee moment, but certainly if anybody needs to see what you've done, you'd want to be in a position to share it with them. And as I've said on previous videos, this doesn't need to be a book, right? Especially if you're a small business, but it does need to be written down. And so if you've done some of this work and you've satisfied yourself kind of intellectually and emotionally that you're doing the right thing, but you haven't just popped it down either on a set of slides or in a risk matrix or in any one of a dozen other ways that are fine, then July is not a bad time to just seal that off. And that'll get you to where you need to be in terms of your own prep. But there is another piece to the jigsaw, and that is that the providers that you use, the manufacturers, to use consumer duty language, that create the stuff that allows you to implement your financial plans. So portfolio managers, wealth managers, DFMs, fund managers, platforms, SIP providers, product providers, all these guys all have been working away with greater or lesser success and kind of intensity, I suppose, to create their own target market assessments and value for money statements. And you should be pulling those in now. They should be ready to share those with you. If any of them aren't, they really don't have long, and they should really have had that ready for you now, because you have to now compare what they've done to the needs of your client base to check that they match. And if they don't match, so if, for example, you have a client base that you know likes to hold significant lumps of cash, and the platform, let's say, has said, listen, we're not a suitable home for people to hold large amounts of cash for a long period of time, and you're actually using it for that because of whatever reason, then that's a thing that you're going to have a look at, record that you have that disconnect. So you might even have a column here in a spreadsheet that says this is how we define it, a column here that says this is how Mark Paulson platform defines it, and does it match, tick or cross, and if it doesn't, what are we going to do about it? So these kinds of little matrices and that kind of thing are not a bad way to go about this. So providers of whatever stripe or hue, right, should have given you this information by now, or given when you're watching this, they only have a few weeks left to do that. The closer they take it to the end of July deadline, of course, the less time you have to finish your work, because you need to have done this by the end of July. Now, in the real world, of course, things are going to spill over, but I think it isn't unreasonable in a sector that thrives on professionalism to think that we were set deadline by the regulator, and most of us worked extremely hard to make that deadline. So we really do want to see that stuff complete by that time. Now, if you use a very wide set of solutions, again, across DFMs and fund managers and all that kind of stuff, then you're going to have quite a few of these to bring in. And if you have lots of client segments, then you're going to need to do this exercise for each of those client segments. So it's not a zero effort thing, but it's kind of a good exercise, actually, because what it will do is tease out whether there are any kind of lingering areas where you're sort of still doing something because it's just how you've always did it. Maybe it doesn't match quite properly. Maybe there's something better you could be doing, but it isn't broken enough to be able to justify, I guess, spending the time on it. But when you see it laid out in a consumer duty framework, well, that maybe just makes you feel a little bit differently about it, and that's no bad thing. So that's what July is about, right? It's about getting in that data from providers and about measuring it up to the work that you've already done as the manufacturer of your own service proposition. Now, I'm using that word manufacturer a lot, and that's deliberate. I think we've all now seen in trade press or at conferences or whatever else, some of you might have even seen me bang on about it from time to time, that not only are advisors manufacturers of your own advice process, you are also potentially manufacturers of other things too, particularly if you run your own portfolios, or, of course, if you go down the advisor as platform route. And the FCA have a number of definitions, I won't run through them here, there's no time, to help you understand whether you are a manufacturer or not. But if we think about a centralized investment proposition, for example, if you design it yourself, if you influence the design of it, if you bespoke the design of somebody else, so you take somebody else's asset allocation and you twist it for you because you feel that you know it's a little bit light on, I don't know, Uzbekistani futures or who knows what, right? Anytime you do anything like that, you jump the fence and you become a manufacturer. Rather than just a distributor of that part of it. Same if you just use a retail platform that's provided to you, then you're just a distributor of that platform. I know that doesn't sound very nice, but in regulatory terms, it's what you are. But if you start changing things on that platform and you've asked them to do specific things for you, and I'm talking here about things that are above and beyond putting a logo on it, that kind of stuff doesn't really matter. Perhaps you've asked a platform to change a business flow or something like that. If you're the kind of firm that gets into that sort of thing, then you're a manufacturer. Strictly speaking, you would be a co-manufacturer, but that co kind of prefix is sort of irrelevant, actually, because manufacturing status is a binary state, like a bit like pregnancy, right? You are or you aren't a manufacturer of each stage of the process. For each stage that you are, you need to do the work again that you've done on your advisory service proposition. Okay, so if you are creating your own portfolios, so let's say you're one of the advisors that has an investment committee, you really love the discipline of staying in charge of investment rather than outsourcing it to someone else as a manufacturer, that's completely fine, right? It's not a problem for you to be a manufacturer at all, but that is what you are. And so for that part of your process, because you're manufacturing it, you need to go back through, do your target market assessment, check the applicability of what you've created to that target market, check it's working as it should, benchmark your services against other companies that are doing the same things to try and work out if you're delivering value for money, and preferably, because it's also tightly connected in advisory businesses, also think about vulnerability with that too. I think you can't stress vulnerability too much in terms of peppering it through the entire process. If you're just using somebody else's investment solutions, you don't have to do that. You just have to read their stuff and check it fits with yours. But of course, if it's your stuff, then it has to be your stuff that you match against another bit of your own stuff, if you get what I mean. I think there are some firms out there who haven't necessarily got that all sorted out yet. And that's certainly something that needs addressing pretty quickly. So have a good think. If you are a manufacturer of any part of the process other than just the act of giving advice and planning to clients, then make sure that you repeat the process you've gone through for your advisory services in terms of that element. Again, look, this doesn't need to be 65 pages of kind of intense worry and analysis, but you do have to hold yourself to the same standard as, let's say, a third-party outsourced portfolio manager would be holding themselves to. The fact that it's in-house and you control both parts of it, as I say, it's fine, but it doesn't let you off the hook. And if you think about it from a client point of view, which is what Consumer Duty is meant to be about, a client would have the right, I think, to expect that whether they went through the door of an advisor who outsourced to a portfolio manager, or the next door advisor firm that happens to insource portfolio management, they would have the right to expect the same levels of rigor, oversight, and frankly, consumer dutiness from the propositions into which they're being placed. So that's kind of the thing there. What are we seeing out and about? Well, I guess for advisor firms, there's so many of you. Many of you are at very different stages in your evolution in terms of how much you're manufacturing, how much record keeping you're doing. So I think practice is quite variable there, but most firms that I speak to now are reasonably well down the path and perhaps are starting to get just a little frustrated with some providers who aren't stumping up the information and the data that they require to finish the job. And I think that's a pretty common complaint. We are definitely seeing a sort of two-speed market developing with providers, and particularly DFMs, actually, between those that are openly saying, right, we've got the work done, or we haven't, but this is when we're going to have it, and we're well on the way. I think it's, people are where they are. So as long as they're open and transparent, then that's fine. You can work with that. And when we've got it, we will publish it and everybody can take a view. And those that are doing this a little bit, and we are seeing a distressing number of providers saying, well, we're not publishing our stuff. You can only have it if you speak to XYZ person who will not only provide it to you, but will tell you how to interpret it and make sure that you fully understand what's there, and so on and so on and so on and so on. That doesn't feel great to me. I would view providers that are working in that way with a little bit of kind of skepticism, because given that a fair chunk of the market is happy to publish and be scrutinized, which is what Consumer Duty is all about, then to have that kind of very thou shalt not kind of approach to it feels a little bit funny to me. So there we go. That's kind of it from me this time. We're absolutely coming up to the sharp end of it now. I appreciate everybody's very busy and got lots to do. I do know some firms that have put the work in on Consumer Duty and have actually found it a valuable process. I know others that have really pushed back against it and said this is a waste of time. There's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy element about that, I guess. So wherever you are, a little bit of focus, a little bit of effort, good communication with the providers and the manufacturers that you use. In the last push, write everything down. Even if it's a bit of a mess just now, you can come back and tidy that up later, but just get this last bit of work over the brow of the hill, and then we can all take stock over the summer. So I hope that's been of at least some use. Lovely to have the chance to speak to you again. Thanks for Morningstar for letting me do this, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.